In March of 1959, a 9-year-old girl left her home in Spokane, Washington to sell campfire mints. She never came back. What followed became one of the most haunting child murder cases in American history. Thousands searched for her. A military helicopter crashed during the rescue effort. Generations of detectives dedicated their entire careers trying to solve the mystery. And for 62 years, the killer got away with it. Until modern DNA technology uncovered a horrifying truth buried for decades. This is the tragic story of Candice "Candy" Rogers. On Friday, March 6, 1959, Candy Rogers came home from school like any normal fourth grader. She played with her dog, ate an oatmeal cookie, and prepared to go door to door selling campfire mints. Candy was a member of the Bluebirds, the younger division of the Campfire Girls of America. She carried 7 boxes of mints and stayed within her neighborhood in Spokane's west central area. At first, nothing seemed unusual. But as darkness fell, Candy still hadn't returned home. Her family immediately became worried. Neighbors joined the search. Soon police officers flooded the streets looking for the missing little girl. Then late that evening, investigators found something chilling. Boxes of campfire mints were discovered scattered along a road near the Fort George Wright Bridge. It was the first sign that something had gone terribly wrong. And sadly, it would not be the last. By the next morning, all of Spokane knew Candy's name. The city mobilized in one of the largest search efforts the region had ever seen. More than 1,000 volunteers searched fields, forests, riverbanks, and roads. The U.S. Air Force joined the operation. Boy Scouts, Marines, postal workers, local businesses, and ordinary citizens all volunteered to help. At one point, nearly 1,200 people were searching simultaneously. But then tragedy struck the rescue effort itself. A Sikorsky H-19 helicopter assisting in the search hit high-tension power lines above the Spokane River. The aircraft crashed into the water below. 3 Air Force airmen were killed. The search for one little girl had already claimed additional lives. Yet despite all the manpower, Candy was nowhere to be found. Days turned into weeks. Hope slowly disappeared. Then on March 21st, 16 days after Candy vanished, 2 off-duty airmen hunting in a wooded area noticed a pair of children's shoes. They reported the discovery immediately. The next morning, search teams returned to the site. And only minutes later, they found Candy's body. She had been hidden beneath pine needles and brush in a wooded area nearly 7 miles from her home. The 9-year-old had been sexually assaulted and strangled using pieces of her own clothing. The entire city was horrified. But for investigators, the nightmare was only beginning. Police received thousands of tips. Suspects were questioned. Known sex offenders were investigated. But in 1959, forensic science was extremely limited. There were no security cameras,
no GPS,
no cell phones, and most importantly, no DNA testing. The case slowly turned cold. Years became decades. Retiring detectives passed the case files down to younger investigators with one request: don't give up. Candy Rogers' murder became known as the Mount Everest of Spokane cold cases. Investigators believed the answer was hidden somewhere in the evidence collected back in 1959. And remarkably, those investigators had preserved that evidence carefully enough for future technology to eventually analyze it. That decision would prove critical more than 60 years later. In the early 2000s, scientists successfully isolated a semen sample from Candy's clothing. A DNA profile was entered into CODIS, the National Criminal DNA Database. But there was no match. One major suspect, serial killer Hugh Morse, was officially ruled out. Again, the case stalled. Then in 2021, investigators partnered with a Texas forensic lab called Othram. Using advanced forensic genealogy, scientists extracted usable DNA from the decades-old evidence. The DNA was uploaded into genealogy databases. Eventually, investigators narrowed the possibilities down to 3 brothers. One name stood out: John Ray Horf. He had lived only about a mile from Candy. And unlike the others, he had surviving children. Detectives contacted Hoff's daughter and explained the devastating possibility that her father could be linked to the murder of a child. Despite the shock, she cooperated fully and submitted a DNA sample. The results were staggering. Investigators determined it was 2.9 million times more likely that her DNA was related to the crime scene sample than someone from the general population. But detectives still wanted absolute certainty. So they made a difficult decision. They exhumed John Ray Hoff's body. DNA extracted from his remains was then compared directly to the evidence collected in 1959. The result was undeniable. Scientists concluded the DNA match was 25 quintillion times more likely to belong to Hoff than to any unrelated person. After 62 years, Candy Rogers' killer had finally been identified. John Ray Hoff was only 20 years old when Candy was murdered. He grew up in Spokane and served in the Army near Fairchild Air Force Base. 2 years after Candy's murder, Hoff attacked another woman. The similarities were terrifying. Unlike Candy, this victim survived. Hoff was convicted and spent 6 months in jail. Afterward, he worked various jobs as a salesman and laborer. Then in 1970, at just 31 years old, John Ray Hoff died by suicide. For decades, nobody connected him to Candy Rogers. Not investigators. Not neighbors. Not even his own family. When police informed Hoff's daughter about the DNA results, she described her emotions as disbelief, anger, and heartbreak. She had spent her entire life believing her father was a good man battling depression. Instead, investigators told her he was responsible for one of Spokane's most horrific crimes. Candy Rogers never got the chance to grow up. Her family spent decades without answers. Many of them died before the truth was finally discovered. But after 62 years, the mystery that haunted Spokane was finally solved. Not through confessions. Not through eyewitnesses. But through relentless determination. And the evolution of science. Detective Zach Stormont later said this case wasn't measured in hours. It was measured in careers. Generations of investigators refused to let Candy be forgotten. And because of that persistence, a little girl murdered in 1959 finally received justice in 2021, even if it came far too late. If you found this case fascinating, disturbing, or important, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into true crime mysteries, cold cases, and criminal investigations. And let me know in the comments. Do you think modern DNA technology will eventually solve every cold case? Thanks for watching. And rest in peace, Candy Rogers.